Hello, my fear seekers. I'm your fear master, and I welcome you to another spine-chilling episode of the Fear Factory Stories. Tonight, we're diving into the eerie realms of digital terror. In our interconnected world where swipes and messages connect us to strangers, sometimes the most innocent interactions can spiral into nightmares. Imagine a simple swipe on a dating app, or an unexpected text message turning your life into a horror story. So, turn off the lights, cuddle up with your favorite blanket, and remember, in the digital age, the scariest monsters might just be hiding behind a profile picture or an unknown number. Enjoy, if you dare. The online dating nightmare. At first glance, it seems to be the case, but for some reason, I'm not entirely convinced. My former love interest is a very successful and intelligent woman, largely what attracted me to her in the first place. I have a growing suspicion that she may be focusing her vast resources on getting revenge on me, in whatever form that may take. I'm not really sure. Naturally, I fear that she might take the conventional route and simply end my life, probably by her own hand, maybe another stabbing. However, she is more than capable of going even further and extending my suffering indefinitely. That's why I'm taking the trouble to publish my version of the story. I'm very aware that I probably look like a fool in some circumstances, but I don't care. I just want there to be a public record of the truth in case I disappear. My lawyer also has a copy in case I'm no longer around to testify in my own defense. It's undeniable that law enforcement will eventually catch her at some point. However, I worry that it will be too late for me. So if you hear about the death or disappearance of some unknown lawyer from New York State through the media, please remember what you read here. I live here in New Zealand, and in late 2018, I felt somewhat lonely. So I decided to download the Tinder dating app to try to find a good guy to go on some dates with, maybe even find a long-term boyfriend. I ended up matching with a guy who had come from Australia, and we chatted for 2 weeks before finally meeting. The conversation was quite light, nothing too heavy, and it was fun. As I said, he was from Australia, so we talked about Australian things, and I remember telling him how much I wanted to visit Melbourne. He said he had been there once or twice and started making recommendations for some cool cafes he knew. He seemed like a nice, normal guy, and when we agreed to meet, I was happy to do so. However, maybe 5 days before the date we were supposed to meet, he became very persistent and impatient. He would message me several times a day, and if I didn't respond immediately, he would ask if something was wrong. It struck me as odd that he became so clingy after starting out so confidently. He kept trying to move the date up so we could meet sooner, and completely forgot if I had told him I was busy on a particular day, almost as if he wasn't paying attention or didn't care about what I had to say. Honestly, it was very unusual for someone to be so persistent with me. I had dated guys before who were maybe a bit persistent, but only out of nervous excitement, a different type of excitement than this Australian guy. I just couldn't understand why he couldn't wait until the Sunday we had agreed to meet. It felt very narcissistic, and I should have seen it as the warning sign it was, and not met him at all. I kept the messages on my phone for a while, so I had a record of the exact dates and times he sent some of the messages. On December 2nd, he sent me a message just after 9 a.m., saying, "Good morning, how are you?" And again, an hour and a half later. I didn't respond to the first message because I was asleep, but I think he took it badly because he said it was fine if I had changed my mind and didn't feel like going on the date. That's when I replied and confirmed that I would meet him later that day. We met and went to a place called Rebbe. It's a very standard bar, very popular, and one that many people go to, but it's definitely more of a nighttime bar. I had never drunk there in the afternoon or during the day, but it was open and seemed to have a relaxed atmosphere, and he wanted to go there. So there we went. He was a bit bigger than the photos on his Tinder profile showed, and it was obvious he had gained some weight. He had big, distinctive eyes and was very well groomed. His clothes looked freshly washed and ironed, and he obviously took great care of his skin and things like that. He was really handsome. I remember asking him lots of different questions, and he just talked to me. He tried to ask me some questions, but they weren't very deep. I thought he was a bit nervous, to be honest, but that's not unusual on a first date. Things started to unravel at one point, because he had said one thing in the messages about where he worked and something different on that date. I started to feel a bit uncomfortable. I wanted to trust him, but as soon as he started showing some inconsistencies, I began to wonder if he was just lying to impress me. Since he was from Australia, I asked him where he had met his Kiwi friends, and he said all his friends were cops or somehow involved in law enforcement. He said he had met them while drinking in various bars. They had gotten to know each other over time, and they regularly invited him to their houses for barbecues and things like that. He also mentioned that his best friend from Australia was coming to be a prosecutor in the Crown Court. That's when I noticed that many of the things he talked about had a recurring theme. It seemed he was obsessed with that kind of thing, which in hindsight explains a lot. I think he was trying to process some of the things he had been doing in the days before, and it was coming out in his conversation style. He obviously thought a lot about cops, corpses, and ways people can be killed, prosecution and justice in the judicial system, and it came out in a very strange way on our first date. As I said earlier, we talked a lot about his friendship with cops, and he went into quite a bit of detail about the investigations they apparently shared with him. He said they were having a tough time because some people were disappearing in the Waitakere Mountains. He told me that police sniffer dogs could only detect decaying flesh up to about 4 meters below the ground, so if bodies were buried deeper than that, the police wouldn't be able to find them. I thought it was a bit morbid to talk about on the first date, but it was an interesting fact. He also talked about all the different kinds of poisonous snakes in Australia and became quite animated about it. He obviously had a passion for the natural world. He was a bit eccentric, but I thought it was cute. I also love animals, so I was glad we had something in common, and it made me feel a bit more relaxed again. But then, just as I was starting to feel comfortable with him again, he began to tell me a really strange and creepy story. He told me how crazy it is that a guy can make a small mistake and then go to jail for the rest of his life for it. He told me about a guy he knew in Australia who had consensual, intimate relations involving choking with his girlfriend and ended up accidentally killing her in the process. He assured me that it was all a horrible and tragic accident, how things just went wrong suddenly, and how the guy was really upset because he loved her and would never hurt her on purpose. But still, the guy was charged with manslaughter and sent to prison for a long time. What I know now is that this could have been him testing his story with me. When he saw that I felt a bit uncomfortable with what he was saying, he tried to change the subject to talk about more mundane things. I didn't try to run away or anything. I'm pretty used to dealing with all sorts of people, and I'm not saying that people who talk about dark things on the first date are bad people or anything, but it was definitely strange. We spent some time together, but after about 3 hours or so, I made some excuses about why I had to go, and we said our goodbyes. As we were saying goodbye, he said, "My car is this way," and pointed towards a particular street. My car was on the same street, but at that moment, I felt uncomfortable, and my instincts told me to walk another way. He was also much bigger than me, so if something went wrong, I knew I couldn't defend myself. In retrospect, it was a good decision. It was my intuition, my brain saying, "This is strange, that's strange." And now, looking back, it's really strange to think about who he really was. I don't think it's within the realm of what the normal human brain can comprehend, but just the day before we met, the guy I went on that first date with had murdered a girl in his hotel room, a British girl named Brenda Wilson. The reason he mentioned that his friend had accidentally strangled his girlfriend is because that's exactly how he killed her. Whether it was intentional or not, is another question entirely. Additionally, the reason he mentioned all the stuff about the Waitakere Mountains is because that's where he ended up disposing of her body, and all that other stuff about the sniffer dogs was research he had been doing the night before, and that was still consuming his mind. It's hard to look back and think that just happened to her. From what I understand, while we were on our date, her body was still in his hotel room, hidden under the bed or wrapped in a blanket. There was nothing I could have done, and now I know that. But it's still very hard to accept. I think if it had been a date at night, I could have potentially been a victim. I'm greatly comforted knowing that I have sharp instincts and take online dating safety very seriously. I have nothing against women who are willing to go home with someone on the first date, but I want to tell young women to take one more step in their thinking when they're on a date to see how well they really know that person. Since then, I've dated charming and trustworthy men, but I always think that I also really know them. This has made me slow down a bit and disclose a bit less personal information. I know in modern dating it's quite common to give people your Instagram account, but you're giving them access to a lot of personal information. It's really dangerous, and I just want to encourage people to take a step back and think before doing that. There's nothing wrong with taking the time to get to know someone and taking things slowly. Alcohol has a big effect. It's part of the social fabric of dating and part of life today, but it still comes with a big risk. Women need to be very aware of how much they're drinking on dates, and unfortunately, sometimes drinks are spiked. We live in this world where people are still idealistic about how things should be in dating. But incidents like these set things back 10 or 20 years, where women still have to hold their drinks between their fingers or can't leave a drink on the table. We're not as developed as we think in areas like dating. Technology has moved us forward, but I think people are as they've always been. With the advancement of technology, we thought we would become more refined, but we're the same, just with new technology. I think the invention of dating apps is a wonderful thing, and I wouldn't want to live in a world without them. But I just wish for a world where women don't have to think about their safety all the time. The experience I had taught me a lot about the importance of caution and attention to detail. It's not just about trusting our instincts, but also being aware of warning signs and not ignoring them for the sake of courtesy or the desire not to seem paranoid. The unsettling message. I had been working for almost 12 hours straight, and by the time I got home, I was completely exhausted, both physically and mentally. As I entered my bedroom, I felt a wave of relief thinking about finally being able to relax. However, just as I was about to lie down on my bed, my phone made a sharp notification sound that pulled me out of my stupor of exhaustion. Wondering what could be so urgent, I reached for my nightstand and picked up my phone, squinting at the bright screen in the dimly lit room. Unlocking my phone, I noticed a message from an unknown number on the screen. The message read, "Do you miss me? I wish you would remember our first kiss." As I read the words, a chill ran down my spine. I felt a flood of unpleasant memories rushing through my mind. That night, I had been waiting outside the bar for Kelly, my girlfriend, for a few minutes. While I was there, I felt a sudden tap on my back that startled me. I turned around to see a girl with a green jacket smiling at me. She was quite beautiful, with long brown hair and bright brown eyes. However, something about her made me feel uneasy and scared. Maybe it was the way she looked at me with a touch of intensity. Her smile seemed a bit strange, as if she was trying too hard to make a good impression. She asked if I wanted to join her inside the bar, but I politely declined and told her I was waiting for my girlfriend. Her smile disappeared, and her face twisted into an unpleasant expression before she walked into the bar. A few minutes later, Kelly arrived, and we headed into the bar. We were having fun, enjoying each other's company, when I felt a piercing stare on us. Kelly noticed it too, and started looking around uncomfortably. I looked in the direction of the stare and noticed the same girl sitting at the bar, watching us. When she saw that we noticed her, she quickly looked away. As the night went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still watching us. Finally, I asked Kelly if she wanted to go to my place, and she agreed. While driving, I kept looking in the rearview mirror, feeling like someone was following us, but every time I looked, there was no one there. As soon as we arrived at my apartment, I felt a sense of unease. I scanned the surroundings, looking for any signs of danger. Even though I couldn't see anyone suspicious, I still had the persistent feeling that someone was watching us. Not wanting to take any chances, I asked Kelly to stay close to me as we entered. After locking the door, we headed to the living room where we settled on the couch. We spent some time scrolling through movie options until we finally settled on a romantic movie. As the movie progressed, we became more comfortable with each other, and the room filled with the sound of laughter and whispered comments. Eventually, we found ourselves wrapped in each other's arms. Our lips met in a passionate kiss. We made love for what seemed like hours, our bodies entwined in a frenzy of desire. Finally, exhausted but content, we fell asleep in each other's arms, the warmth of our love still present in our bodies. I woke up in the middle of the night feeling a light touch on my hair. My first thought was that it must be Kelly, my girlfriend, trying to wake me up. Without opening my eyes, I reached out and grabbed the hand, but when I finally opened my eyes, I was shocked to see the girl who had been outside the bar that night standing at the edge of my bed. My heart started racing as I tried to understand what was happening. How had she gotten into my apartment? Why was she touching my hair? I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized we weren't alone in the room. I considered getting up and confronting the intruder, but my body was paralyzed by shock and fear. Suddenly, she leaned down and kissed me, and I was too stunned to react. It wasn't until I regained my senses that I confronted her. The commotion woke Kelly. She was startled to see a stranger in her house and demanded to know who she was. As I told her that I didn't know the girl grabbed the lamp from the table and lunged at Kelly, but before she could do anything, I grabbed her. While holding her, I asked Kelly to call 911. Kelly frantically dialed 911, her fingers trembling with fear. She recounted the events of the past few minutes to the operator. After what felt like an eternity, the sound of sirens broke the silence of the apartment. The police arrived, and their presence provided us with a sense of relief and security. As the officers escorted the creepy girl out, her eyes locked onto mine with a penetrating intensity that left me feeling uncomfortable. Even though they were taking her away, her gaze seemed to drill into me, sending chills down my spine and leaving me with an uneasy feeling. I'm relieved to say that I never saw that girl again after that terrible experience. It left me with such an uncomfortable feeling that lingered for a while. I remember hoping never to cross paths with her again. The thought of encountering her once more made me feel anxious and nervous. However, over time, I gradually forgot about her and moved past the experience. The date with Emily. It was my first date with a girl from an online dating site. I offered to have her come over to my place and cook for her. I had been out of the dating world for a long time, as I had recently broken up with my girlfriend. At that time, the woman's name was Emily. She was 26 and I was 32. I didn't think inviting her over for dinner before meeting her was weird. If anything, it would be more relaxed and comfortable than meeting at a bar or restaurant. I was cooking penne alla vodka with garlic bread and wine, my favorite combo. Emily arrived around 6:30. I welcomed her and asked her to have a seat at one end of the kitchen table while I finished preparing the meal and tried to get to know her. She wasn't as talkative as I had expected based on her appearance. I had to carry most of the conversation. I was a bit nervous, given it was my first date in years, and it didn't help that she wasn't exactly the easiest to talk to. I served a plate of food and a glass of wine, and then she made an odd request. She wanted me to bring a candle so we could toast properly. I had no choice but to go along with it. I left the kitchen to the pantry in the hallway to get a candle and a lighter. When I returned to the kitchen, I saw Emily quickly sit back down. It seemed suspicious. "Everything okay?" I asked, to which she replied that she had just needed to rinse her hands. It was strange because I hadn't heard the faucet, but I let it slide and lit the candle. Then we made a small toast. I was about to take a sip of my wine when I noticed something floating in the glass, something that wasn't there before. It looked like a powdered substance dissolving in the wine. I observed as she watched me not take a sip of my wine. I pretended to take a sip and nervously continued the conversation, assuming the worst, that she had tried to drug me. But I couldn't just accuse her of that, and if I was wrong, I'd seem like a lunatic. We ate our meal and cleared the table. Afterward, she excused herself to go to the bathroom, which I directed her to. She was gone for a while, but when she returned, she said she had to leave because her dog was sick. I had no problem with her leaving. I walked her to the door and gave her a goodbye hug. I went back to the wine glass and smelled it, but it only smelled like wine. I poured it out to be safe. It must have been around 2:30 or so when I heard a glass fall in my kitchen. That terrified me because, well, glasses are pretty static objects. I didn't see why or how one could suddenly fall off the counter. My door opened and someone walked in. I didn't move, pretending to be asleep, but with one eye half open, I saw someone stand in the doorway for a few seconds and then leave the room. I waited a minute before getting up to follow them and hopefully get to the kitchen phone to call the police. There was a flash of light in the living room from the street lamp. With that, I could see her body in the corner of the room. She wasn't crouched down or anything. She was just standing still in her place. "Emily," I said, fearful of what would happen next. She was standing next to the knife block. "Emily, if you leave right now, I won't call the police." There was a dreadful silence before she put something back on the counter, walked to the back door, and left. What she put back on the counter turned out to be a knife. When she left, I locked the door, of course. I believe that when she asked to use the bathroom, she unlocked the back door with plans to return after her plan to drug me failed. I called the police and they took the knife to look for fingerprints. Based on her criminal record, the police later went to Emily's house and arrested her. I didn't press charges. And there you have it, my fear seekers. A chilling reminder that not all connections are worth making. Whether it's a seemingly perfect match on a dating app or a mysterious text that sends shivers down your spine, always trust your instincts. In the digital age, our greatest fears can come from the most unexpected places. Stay cautious, stay curious, and remember, some nightmares start with a click. Until next time, I'm your Fear Master, signing off. Sweet dreams, and be careful who you swipe for.